This is a new approach to politics and ethics, new and comprehensive. It's prompted by a distinction commonly drawn between persons and human beings, a false distinction, and for many, a fatal distinction. Nevertheless, a distinction widely accepted in law and medicine. It is this distinction, affirmed at the ballot box, which sees some human beings, even now, excluded from the social contract and denied the protections of equality, human rights, and procedural fairness. To universalize these protections, ensuring their extension to every human being, regardless of their circumstances, I will link a rational basis for human rights with a natural and compelling reason of moral governance, a natural and determining reason for every human being. I will argue, going well beyond the sphere of moral governance to encompass our every undertaking, that what we are and what we ought do are in lockstep, that human beings naturally acquire knowledge, and that for all human beings, and in every instance, only the known is actionable. We have no agency, no directive capacity over the unknown. As a consequence, it cannot qualify as an ought. And as a consequence, when we're deciding what we ought do, we have one place to look, one resource, one cache of available oughts. How is this cache, the knowledge we have, initially secured and subsequently increased? What is the process that equips us, alone among the animals, to respond to ought questions? And is it a natural process? Is it the case, as I claim, that we move seamlessly from being human to that which human beings ought do in the simple absence of options, in knowledge naturally acquired and singularly, uniquely actionable? Is the compelling ought finally evident? Our freedom in relation to the life issues, abortion and assisted suicide, will be central to today's presentation. This focus notwithstanding, if effective agency in every area of our lives is determined by knowledge, a rational basis for human rights, a knowable basis, cannot but inform our freedom in the many contested interactions current in our politics. My sole reference over the next 40 minutes will be humanness. Since you live humanness and have a vital stake in the accuracy of its portrayal, particularly in politics, I invite you to question my reading of it. I invite you to challenge my reading of your humanness, beginning now. Human beings naturally apprehend and rationally address existence. Our senses are open. Our rationality processes the information available. We are rational animals. We involuntarily acquire information about existence and involuntarily apply the species-specific means of processing information we call rationality. We read existence. The rational address of existence yields knowledge, human knowledge, not perfect knowledge and certainly not final knowledge. Knowledge that is tested, reviewed, confirmed, and where necessary, corrected. Knowledge variously characterized depending on the area of inquiry as beyond reasonable doubt, on the available evidence, to the standard of the day, experimentally confirmed through replication, subject to peer review, to administrative appeal, to longitudinal studies, to any and all evaluations consistent with the nature of the inquiry and the demands of rational address. In more detail, Professor Finnis in Natural Law and Natural Rights presents a 7-part methodology of rational address, beginning the principles of logic. For example, the forms of deductive inference are to be used and adhered to in all one's thinking, even though no non-circular proof of their validity is possible, since any proof would employ them. Deductive inference is instinctive. If you kick your toe on an exposed root and connect the pain, your swollen toe, and the stubbornness of the tree root, deductive inference is in play. Walking boots might have been the recommendation of inductive inference, the recommendation of prior experience. Either way, we are well equipped to review our situation and proceed. While our perspective never rises above the human, we are a long way from dragging ourselves through life in a state of bafflement and despair, stumbling from one obstacle to the next. This is evident, of course, but also necessary. We act on knowledge, or others do so on our behalf, as a condition of the having of humanness. Stasis is not an option, and the embrace of irrationality is fatal, usually in short order, for individuals and communities. Having humanness disposes us and drives us to rational decision-making, to effective engagement with existence. More of which. In engaging effectively with existence, and drinking petrol to slack a thirst would be an example of ineffective engagement, Professor Finnis notes, an adequate reason why anything is so rather than otherwise is to be expected, unless one has a reason not to expect such a reason. A tropical flower blooming in central London might adequately be explained by a greenhouse. Conversely, there is no reason a particular cloud resembles a galloping horse, certainly no reason to visit the bookies. Continuing with Professor Finnis, self-defeating theses are to be abandoned, such as the assertions "I do not exist" or "knowledge is unattainable." The considered use of language in defense of such assertions is evidence of both a store of knowledge and a storekeeper. Next, phenomena are to be regarded as real unless there is some reason to distinguish between appearance and reality. This distinction is made, and made with ease, wherever movies are shown. Next, a full description of data is to be preferred to partial descriptions, and an account or explanation of phenomena is not to be accepted if it requires or postulates something inconsistent with the data for which it is supposed to account. Put simply, inquiries are advanced by clarity in terminology, attention to accuracy and relevance, by avoiding guesswork, and by remaining open to the question, what more do we know? Next, a method of interpretation which is successful is to be relied upon in further similar cases until contrary reason appears. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and don't reinvent the wheel are the corresponding adages. Finally, theoretical accounts which are simple, predictively successful, and explanatorily powerful are to be accepted in preference to other accounts. Alien abduction, for example. Other principles exist, but none of the above should strike you as unfamiliar, as they are part of the toolkit of the rational animal. Knowledge is that which satisfies the principles of rational address and continues to do so. Speculation is yet to satisfy these principles. Scientific endeavour, improvements in technology, or the accumulation of additional data might see speculation firm into knowledge. But the principles of rational address are the test. Naturally and advantageously, we build on knowledge involuntarily acquired through rational address with knowledge voluntarily acquired by the same means. But of the two, the former is entailed. No invitation is issued, and refusal is impossible. The significance of knowledge involuntarily acquired is that it cannot be plausibly disavowed. It is on the table, and it brings us to the table, naturally availing us of knowledge sufficient for communal living. Rational address convenes and thereafter mediates the communal table, serving as both source and certification of human knowledge. Clearly our senses don't interpret themselves, nor do our dreams. We cannot divine an individual's guilt through art or inspiration. We cannot arrive at guilt by goal setting, arrest and conviction targets, for example, or by relying on a post-conviction reduction in the incidence of similar crimes. We cannot progress to knowledge in any field by suppressing, fabricating, or avoiding evidence, by feigning ignorance, or by misapplying rational address. The height of a mountain is not determined by polling onlookers or by appointing a barrister to interrogate the peak. There are no shortcuts. no workarounds, no profit in idealism, and no refuge in ideology. Propositions are immediately suspect if they rely on privacy or secrecy, if special insights or dispositions are required, or if they are too complex to explain or implement. Rational plans have a human scale and human intelligibility. They are not identical plans. They are not one size fits all, but all answer convincingly to the requirements of rational address. Agency over the known is readily and regularly demonstrated. It is an unremarkable everyday occurrence, a commonplace. The claim made here that we only have agency over the known, that we are confined to agency over the known, waits on a single demonstration to the contrary, theoretical or practical. In the absence of either, the following summary holds. The rational address of existence is vital for our survival, the explanation of our flourishing, the rationale of open government and transparency in legal proceedings, and the common language of our species. It delivers knowledge, a delivery we have no option but to accept. In knowledge, naturally and irresistibly acquired, and in knowledge alone, we realize aught. Only the known is actionable. Common sense directs the questions, what ought I do? How might I direct my life? Is this man guilty? Toward knowledge, present knowledge or its increase, without explicitly recognizing that no alternative presents itself, that only the presently known is presently actionable, and so must circumscribe ought. It is now explicit, and pending evidence to the contrary, normative. All ought questions have knowledge as their object, with rational address its only source. Rational address is the beginning of a process that affords us freedom by presenting us with realisable acts. We see this process at work in our peers, responding with equality, human rights and procedural fairness, not as gift but as due, as recognition of their decision-making capacity, their capacity to direct their own lives. Is the evident rationality of our peers properly located in species membership? Does it resolve to the fact of their humanness, so making due to every human being, in every circumstance, public and private, the address of equality, human rights and procedural fairness? And in offering this address, are we acting on knowledge, confirming and expanding our freedom and the mutual freedom that is the amenity of democracy? As argued, effective engagement with existence follows from the rational address of existence. If, in applying the various elements of rational address, deductive inference might be characterized as connecting the dots, seeking an adequate reason why anything is so rather than otherwise involves a willingness to follow leads to their natural conclusion. In assessing humanness, it is immediately apparent that no human life is self-actuating. No one authors their own existence, nor chooses from a range of existences to alight on humanness. Humanness is thrust upon us. Its imperatives, endowments, and contingencies are not of our making. If an individual has not caused their existence, it is irrational to expect they could account for their existence. Compliance is impossible. As Kant observed, impossibilities cannot serve as obligations. They present as unintelligible propositions and are received always as unintelligible propositions. Laws or public policies that present impossible demands or take the impossible as their starting point are invalid and ultimately absurd. Irrational politics recognizes that no one is in a position to justify their existence. No one has an edge in this matter. No one can be singled out. We neither created humanness nor initiated our involvement in humanness. It happened to us. We are human from the beginning, biologically human, the only way we can be human. We always occupy a position in the human life cycle with no choice in the matter, no option to press ahead or pull back, and always, being corporeal, we take up space. From the beginning, our existence is resourced through the natural world as a share of the natural world. Political acceptance of this fact would, for the greater part of human history, have thoroughly satisfied human rights. salient to our times and contested in our times. Through sexual reproduction, human beings create members of their own species. When pregnant, human beings are pregnant with members of their own species. No one is pregnant with themselves. No one is carrying themselves in utero. Naturally and from the beginning, our existence is intraspecies dependent. Intimately so for 9 months, intensively for up to a third of the human lifespan, and continuing to a greater or lesser extent thereafter. Throughout, claims directed against the bodies of others, mutual claims, stand as constant and constituent elements of human existence, staples of human society. Disregarding knowledge and responding to these claims, or any of the substantive claims of human existence, voids our freedom. In having humanness, we rationally address existence and locate freedom in the knowledge that results, variously and uncontroversially in the laws of physics and chemistry, in avoiding cliff lines and identifying poisons, and in assessing humanness by observing equality, human rights and procedural fairness as universals. Their genesis is in the fact and form of our existence, and in our having that existence with no suggestion of fault. On the facts, we cannot reason to a greater or lesser claim to existence, or, to borrow from the law, the quiet enjoyment of that existence. Fellow feeling prompts a degree of generosity, as does the influence of religion. But in this matter, as in all matters involving human agency, knowledge is the compelling ought. We know, in engaging with other human beings, species is settled at conception. All development occurs within the parameters of humanness, with no reliance on an external organizing principle. Potential is always lack but can have because is, and notwithstanding the common law legacy position, which is an edifice, not an argument, person is a synonym of human being. Synonyms offer focus. Person is an exemplar, neither adding nor subtracting from our knowledge of humanness. Its particular focus is rational address. Our legal system is finely tuned to, in fact predicated on, rational address, knowledge and the slippage between. It recognizes the cyclic expression of rational address, impediments to its expression, and developmental thresholds, and assesses accountability accordingly. We are never held to be acting freely, nor can we claim to be acting freely when we don't know what we are doing. However, the capacity to know what we are doing is natural to humanness, accurately read and properly located in species membership. It cannot be relocated by relying on closed data sets or artificial halts in the reasoning process, or by failing to follow leads to their natural conclusion, to their source. The constant, the steady state of human existence is species membership and all that is consequent on species membership. We constantly and consistently have species membership. Rational address is located here as a species tray, exclusive as far as we know, and the subject of extensive medical and developmental insight into the factors weighing on its expression. It is not superadded by any human being to any human being, though third-party intervention can enhance, retard, or restore its function. Its cyclic expression returns us all, at regular intervals, to a state of vulnerable dependence. Person, as peak rationality, emerges daily from the background of species membership and returns daily whence it came. Always, species membership is the driver. We cannot think of rationality as an enchanted cloud that envelops us at 7 and from which we stumble bewildered some 70 years later, or as something picked up in the street and put in our pocket, such that if our dog had got there first, we would be the ones led around by a collar. It is not happenstance that sees human brains develop in human skulls. Rationality is not said in living and not said in mammalian, but said in and explained by species membership, by humanness. Humanness is an internal organizing principle of cyclic rationality, an internal organizing principle of discrete and distinctive biological structures and functions, the development or exercise of any of which is not a departure from humanness, but ordained by humanness. We never stand outside humanness, studying it from the perspective of persons. We are, as persons, rational animals, human beings, at all times governed by the imperatives, endowments, and contingencies of human existence. We exist without fault. There is no credit or shame in our having existence, and no necessity of justification, including no requirement to justify our existence in the face of another's suffering. Human rights means there is no show-cause burden to our continued having of humanness, no consent pending, initial or ongoing, no performance threshold, and no requirement to perform any aspect of our humanness on demand. It is never the responsibility of human beings unable to access their rationality to make themselves known, since it is impossible for them to do so. Equally, it is impossible for rational agents in their dealings with other human beings to avoid knowledge sufficient for democratic outcomes in situations of conflict. There is never, in our dealings with other human beings, cause to set aside our knowledge of equality, human rights, and procedural fairness. We can never presume to read in insensibility an invitation to asset stripping or a signal of willing divestment of any human endowment. We engage with rational animals whenever we engage with other human beings. The quiet enjoyment of existence is theirs, no less than it is ours. A quick recap before continuing. We arrive at knowledge through a natural process, rational address. In our natural state, we read existence. That is, we rationally address existence, doing so sufficient for communal living. We experience the process of rational address cyclically, not continuously. Democracy holds human knowledge and the self-directedness that draws on knowledge in trust. We acquire knowledge involuntarily and voluntarily. For the rational animal, phenomena invite explanation. We respond through speculation, probing, testing, seeking an adequate reason why anything is so rather than otherwise. That we have found an adequate reason, that we do know what we are doing, is always a testable assertion and valid grounds to challenge accepted societal or individual freedom claims, the status currently accorded abortion and assisted suicide. So, can assisted suicide be considered a human freedom, given our knowledge of the human condition? The stakes are high. Democracy's legitimacy lies in facilitating our only available having, the having of humanness. This having is only possible through adherence to rational address, through acting on knowledge. On the evidence, suicide is directed toward a permanent foreclosure on the exercise of rational address, the foundation of our freedom. It is directed toward a permanent foreclosure on our only available having, the having of humanness. As a rational engagement with existence, democracy cannot repurpose law, medicine, or science to irrational ends. Its legitimacy and potency, its ability to respond effectively to the human condition, relies on acting on knowledge. Every human being is similarly bound. Regardless of the intensity of its expression, choice cannot result in effective engagement with existence unless supported by rational address. Realisable autonomy, realisable control of our lives requires that we and those around us act on knowledge. In acting on knowledge, democracy affirms an equal claim to the having of humanness, rejecting the presumption of a greater claim and, importantly, claims seeking a free hand with humanness, claims seeking a blank check. Assisted suicide falls into the latter category. Its enabling legislation founders on a series of impossibilities: a non-living human being, a non-self-determining human being, a self-determination not bound to knowledge, a relinquishment of humanness and an acceptance of its relinquishment by the rational, a mutual negation of its content, agency presumed capable of unmaking humanness, agency that treats with humanness as an empty vessel. Slave traders face the same impossibilities and pushed on regardless. Certainly we can enslave, but we cannot create humanness to be non-self-determining. We cannot know human beings to be slaves. Misreadings of humanness, whether imposed by others or mutually held, remain misreadings. We cannot have a conversation with our doctor or with democracy, asking either to retain their rationality while treating us as what we are not or indeed ever could be. We cannot ask a doctor to summon their rationality in finding a vein and abandon it in plunging the syringe. Patient and practitioner alike, we are bound to knowledge in the exercise of freedom and bound to humanness without qualification. The you that has humanness cannot be separated from its having. Suicidal ideation conjures the image of a dog chasing its tail. We can neither arrive at death nor depart humanness. Our reason refuses to bracket humanness with either proposition. In contemplating the phenomenon of death, our reason is defeated. Assisted suicide offers the cessation of life with certainty and without pain. Knowing that we can observe, but not for ourselves have, the cessation of life, or any of the accompanying promises, secular or religious, glib or profound, we are left with the certainty of our humanness and the possibility of managing our pain through palliative care. Disregarding all that we know about humanness in frustration that more remains to be known in this field of medicine, disregards our embeddedness in the present age and our reliance on knowledge in every age to secure progress. Assistance for the dying cannot extend beyond best practice in palliative care without the embrace of magical thinking, without launching fatal and unfounded projections of our humanness, without democracy and its institutions failing to hold humanness our due. At no stage in our lives do we present as empty vessels. We are due, without qualification, equality, human rights, and procedural fairness. Read in humanness, these universals are inalienable. Were we to ask that they be set aside in our case, the rational would be unable to comply. Losing our reason in the face of extreme suffering does not sanction a loss of reason in those governing our institutions. Doctors will not issue the medical diagnosis of our choosing, nor courts hand down favourable verdicts on request. Evidence overrides claims of guilt or innocence, of capacity or incapacity. Our doctors and our judges are not performing seals. They are not democracy's glove puppets. They are in the service of reason to be of service to human beings. Service that cannot be furthered by adopting pathways or provisions known to be inconsistent with the having of humanness, or by offers of kindness no longer anchored in the human condition. When invited to kill on the basis of faith, or at the urging of majorities, or in any circumstance where the chain of reasoning is incomplete, the rational stay their hand. They hold to the freedom that is ours before any iteration of democracy or the law. Freedom that arises in the natural acquisition of knowledge and affords us that degree of effective engagement with existence consonant with our current knowledge. Democracy is unable to void the human condition, unable to extend human freedom beyond human knowledge, unable to achieve social progress or advance individual autonomy by means other than the exercise of rational address, the foundation of our freedom. Turning to abortion. Whether in its particulars abortion demonstrates agency over existence, whether we are acting on knowledge throughout, is again a question for rational address, a question informed by law, medicine, and public opinion, but reserved to rational address, to the only methodology proven to realize knowledge. Casual application of this methodology recognizes that at least some aspects of abortion are actionable. We certainly know how to kill. If assisted suicide sees democracy weighing its involvement in killing human beings who have presented themselves to be killed, an unusual situation, abortion takes us to the more familiar territory of killing those who have not sought their own demise. We can now revisit this territory with insights commensurate to the task, including the following. Our knowledge and the knowledge of everyone around us is our only negotiation with a world that would otherwise conspire to make our lives nasty, brutish, and short. Knowledge grows through the exercise of rational address, through chance occurrences, as numerous scientific breakthroughs attest, and through individual and collective contributions. But it remains for each generation that only the presently known is presently actionable. Available choices are, of necessity, confined to available knowledge. The cyclic nature of rational address, compounded by our imperfect control over the timing and maintenance of its expression, compels us to the safety of communal living, specifically to communities centered on knowledge. Person is recognized here as a synonym of human being, usefully offering focus, but incapable of conferring status. Human beings are equally endowed with rationality and ploughing the same furrow in regard to its expression. Potential is always present in human lives and always defined for all animals as lack but can have because is. Human potential is fairly described as pressed down and overflowing. No human life is ever fully realized from one moment to the next. But our potential is not limitless. Human rights are coextensive with the having of humanness insofar as its having is known. We cannot promulgate or defend an unknown. Human rights are not pipe dreams or florid self-imaginings. They are not the stuff of speculation or belief. They are not founded on popular acclaim. They feature among the known and are identified by rational address. Equality is known. No one has invited themselves into existence, nor chosen humanness from a menu, nor determined the parameters of humanness, nor can anyone step outside those parameters. Requiring human beings to account for their existence or the imperatives, endowments, or contingencies of human existence is irrational. The first test of any law is the possibility of compliance. If no one could comply with the law, if no one could meet the standards required, if we have to not be human to satisfy its demands, there is something wrong with the law, not with us. No human being can identify in the circumstances of their existence a greater claim to existence and its quiet enjoyment than any other human being. All our boasts resolve to the having of humanness. Rational laws facilitate and, if necessary, affirm the having of humanness by all human beings on an equal footing. No one has priority. In withholding this affirmation, laws facilitating abortion fail the requirements of rational address, failing to accurately reflect our knowledge of existence. Sliding scales of dignity or value or claim are speculative overlays. In contrast, we know that we are equals, and we know that all human lives are attended by imperatives, endowments, and contingencies, none of which require justification. 9 months in utero is entirely consistent with the having of humanness. No one has conspired that this be the case. It is not a war against women unless humanness is the enemy, unless our knowledge is warring against us. We are knowing animals. Rational address is the source of our knowledge, and our freedom is realized through knowledge. Our rational address is cyclic. It suffers outages, taking our freedom with it. We are familiar with sleep and mental illness. We know the effects of drugs and alcohol. A spike in our body temperature induces delirium. Fear and pain can make us irrational. We can be blinded by anger and ambition. In all these circumstances, we are unable to read existence clearly or comprehensively. While we are engaging rationally with existence, we are sovereign. But when our engagement falters, we are, if we are fortunate, in care. If necessary, restrained in care, and at no time have those restraining us trespassed our freedom. Acting on knowledge and ensuring those around us act on knowledge are twin imperatives of human existence, requiring no justification. Dynamic environments extend these imperatives beyond an individual's immediate horizon, effectively mandating national and international political organization. Having been thrust into human existence, a self-determining existence, we are each entitled to the having of humanness in our own good time and according to our own lights, notwithstanding that we are naturally bound to knowledge as the compelling ought. We are bound not by authoritarian fiat or discomfort with freedom of choice, but by our evident inability to exercise directive capacity over the unknown, by the evident constraints of our humanness, a humanness we cannot distance ourselves from or demand go unrecognized in ourselves or others. For all human beings, and in every circumstance, the proper object and sole medium of human agency is knowledge. We are prompted to vigilance nonetheless, to the codification of human rights, including prohibition on human experimentation, by the damage done in attempting to realize an unknown, by our persistent fantasies on the theme of humanness and our persistent attempts to press these fantasies into service, typically summarized from a human rights perspective as a greater claim to the having of humanness. Sometimes, and this is the assumption underpinning slavery, a claim greater than an entire category of other human beings. Freedom is not at issue in either instance. We have no freedom in irrational projects. Self-determination cannot be considered thwarted if its object or the means employed involve impossibilities. The choice of a greater claim to the having of humanness cannot be realized. Laws supporting such claims are sustained in the public square after the fashion of the emperor's new clothes. Would that they were no more than cautionary tales. There are no circumstances in which abortion can be made to fit with our knowledge of existence. It relies on impossibilities, that reason might find others unequal claimants in the having of humanness, that we might apply rational address to a legal framework and successfully shrink existence to our own desires. If Parliament or the courts could assure us of circumstances warranting a greater one-on-one claim to the having of humanness, much less a claim eclipsing an entire category of other human beings, the evidence would be presented. A path in reason would be shown. Lacking this path, we are compelled to negotiate our existence as equals, as co-claimants from beginning to end in the having of humanness. Seeking or offering assistance in suicide is manifestly beyond the scope of this claim. If we knew ourselves capable of not having humanness, rational address would supply the means, freely and fully, in true accompaniment, without needing to force the issue, without the expediency of beating square pegs into round holes. In the life issues, as in all our decisions and interactions, when holding a speculative position and not recognizing it as such, when in the grip of a compulsion or fantasy or impossible dream, regardless of its popularity, our only freedom is to return to knowledge, to return, in other words, to the realm of the actionable. Every day in democracy, the having of humanness is achieved, and achieved in remarkably diverse ways. The content of human rights is the having of humanness. Anything prejudicial to the having of humanness by all human beings on an equal footing is the antithesis of human rights. Attending to these assertions brings us back to the realm of the actionable. These assertions accord with the rational address of existence. No belief sustains them. To conclude, equality constrains our bodies and our choices, but the constraints are natural and universal. We have our humanness on exactly the same terms, generous terms. Having been thrust into existence, we need not justify our existence, or the imperatives, endowments, or contingencies of human existence. We need not justify the fact or form of our existence. This form mandates among human beings the address of equality, human rights, and procedural fairness. The determining role of knowledge in responding to ought questions forestalls ambit claims of exceptionalism or the need for special pleading on anyone's behalf. The functional divide between the known and the speculative reinforces knowledge as the core business of democracy's institutions. These institutions, particularly schools and hospitals, remain free to treat the speculative as speculative. Religion is not disadvantaged. Knowledge sustains those manageable human communities, typically the family and the nation, in which speculative narratives might flourish. It addresses the practicalities of the widow and the orphan. It offers bread rather than a stone to a hungry child. It is the lack of knowledge that is the substance of the Church's complaint in assessing democracy's response to the vulnerable. Just as no human being can step back into non-existence to reappear at a more opportune moment, a moment of welcome or wantedness, no one can enter a state of suspended animation while awaiting a job offer, while awaiting an uptick in the economy. We have our humanness. We hunger and thirst. We grow and require shelter on a daily basis. Human communities governed by knowledge provide that shelter. Governance by knowledge provides by abandoning policies founded on irrational assertions or directed toward unachievable goals, by inviting the electorate and its representatives to embrace rational address, to act on knowledge while working collaboratively to expand and refine our knowledge base. It repairs the damage done by competing moral frameworks and by relativism's invalidation of any framework lacking a demonstrable premise, a premise now singularly and satisfactorily supplied by knowledge. Knowledge stands astride religious, philosophical, and political tradition as the sole determinant of realisable act. There is no alternative framing device, no separate, safe, or sufficient pathway to self-determination. We act on knowledge at the price of freedom. In naturally acquiring knowledge, we are naturally free. Knowledge sustains effective engagement with existence. It is the everyday accompaniment of our survival, the centerpiece of our deliberations, the focus of our assemblies, of our families and our larger economic and political groupings. It is the means by which we recognize, describe and secure human flourishing. It provides the building blocks of our communities, informing the laws we write and the policies we craft. Its cyclic expression renders us interdependent, and its considered expression establishes us as equals. That our humanness is safe in knowledge is the secular good news. Secularism's insistence that we not look beyond ourselves is unquestionably met, while the Enlightenment's confidence in our self-sufficiency in matters of moral governance is finally justified. Believers might view these developments as evidence that we would not be left orphan, unable to show in reason, our common language, that the human claim to existence and its quiet enjoyment is universally valid, that the qualifying periods, performance tests, and ascetic standards currently serving as disqualifiers for the right to life are universally invalid. We have no hoops to jump through or hurdles to clear. Our humanness is safe in knowledge. The universality of equality, human rights, and procedural fairness, the signal political expression of our humanness, the linchpin of democracy's processes and policies, and the level playing field of all our interactions, is safe in knowledge. Knowledge completes the argument from consequences offered by the UN in its Universal Declaration, and identifies the rights championed in 1948 as aspects of the having of humanness, aspects that in community require a political response, an inclusive response. Including all human beings in the protections of Australia's Human Rights Act is a local and timely political project, and the minimum expression of our standing as equals. But it is in recognising that we need not justify our existence, that no one is walking a tightrope or servicing a debt in having humanness, that sectional approaches to politics cede to the equitable, to solutions consistent with equality, including in its material terms. Supporting parties committed to the whole story, the complete picture, all the available information, is the extension of effective engagement with existence into political decision-making. It is the exercise of human agency in its only viable form, acting on knowledge. Democracy's impulse, the progressive impulse, is to legislate knowledge for the purpose of protecting and expanding our freedom. But insufficient thoroughness in the application of knowledge leaves some human beings vulnerable to the power imbalances inherent in democracy, as democracy's prolonged sponsorship of slavery attests. If we are presented at elections with an incomplete understanding of humanness, or encouraged to adopt inadequate drivers of realisable act, trusting ourselves to the strength of our emotions, or the soundness of our conscience, or the partial knowledge generated by any particular profession, we cease to engage effectively with existence, and the universality of equality, human rights, and procedural fairness is unlikely to be realised. In circumstances where parties begin trading these universals for votes, or where they are no longer understood as read in humanness, as due rather than given, the creation of new parties is warranted. Ideological underpinnings are unnecessary. The reference point of all freedom claims is knowledge. Knowledge provides the means to establish the free society and the license to do so. Taking up this license, applying rational address to every aspect of the democratic life, is necessarily the work of a party, necessarily a work of cooperation and communication. Any party equipped to clarify first principles, to detail how we know and why it matters that we know, to explain the why of democracy, the form of human freedom, and the content of human rights, greatly benefits our politics and our personal lives. We can enjoy these benefits in the latter sphere immediately. The language and reasoning are in place. The planning and commitment that builds a party comes next. And with it a politics in which no one need justify their existence and no one is excluded from the social contract.